everybody. Welcome to Anatomical Gangster. If you're new to the podcast, please subscribe below and share this one with your friends. Today, we are going to be talking to the amazing Rebecca Pratt. Talk about somebody who is mind-blowingly brilliant. You're going to love this conversation, especially if you're in academia. She is currently the president of the Fascial Research Congress, but she's also the professor of anatomy at Oakland University at the William Beaumont School of Medicine in Rochester, Michigan. She completed her PhD in cancer cell biology from Purdue University. She's also been recognized by the American Association of Anatomists for excellence in teaching, scholarly activity, and the service to discipline. She is so loving and has such a mind-body mindset for an anatomist. She's really like nobody that you've ever met. And in this conversation, we talked about her career. We talked about the Fascia Research Congress and what's coming up this August. If you have not registered for the Fascia Research Congress, it is happening in New Orleans, August the 10th to the 14th, and I will be there doing a pre-con. We've got some great presenters coming as well. Jill Miller is going to be there. David Lazondek is going to be there. Eric Franklin, Chris and Ann Frederick, Devo and Robert Schleip. We've got a lineup of scientists, clinicians, and researchers, and this is going to be the best Fascia Congress yet. So I hope that you guys check out the Fascia Research Congress link below, and I hope that you enjoy this conversation with the president of the Fascia Research Congress, Dr. Rebecca Pratt. So Rebecca, thank you so much for coming on Anatomical Gangster. I've been really excited about this just for most of the people I've interviewed this year are men, so I'm always excited to talk to a high-powered female. So first, thank you.
All right, sounds good.
I appreciate it. So Rebecca, I mean, I know you've got this stellar career, and I talked a little bit about this in the introduction. You know, your career in anatomy, you're a professor, you've got just a tiny PhD in cancer cell biology. So I'm just curious, like just share a little bit about your journey in the field of anatomy. What inspired you to pursue an academic career?
Yeah, well, the first thing you will learn is that I am not linear. For someone that is in the sciences that plays a pretty hard research game, that's not how I came into anatomy or even actually extracellular matrix and fascial research. It's all sort of circuitous and following open doors, which I think a lot of us can relate to. I don't like turning down an opportunity to learn. So with that being said, yeah, I think my first introduction to anything morphological was in university. So I did a comparative anatomy course and I did botany dissection. I know that's not nearly as exciting removing a stamen as it probably is, you know, working with mammals, but it was a very cool experience. And I sort of thought, huh, all right, that's fun. And then off I went to pursue marine biology, and I ended up volunteering at NOAA, the National Organization and Institute for Atmospheric Oceans, and I can't remember all the acronyms anymore. But so I did some whale necropsies and dolphin necropsies and was like, oh, okay, I seem to be pretty interested in this, but whatever, I'll just keep doing my thing. And then somehow ended up doing biochemistry for my PhD, but training in veterinary anatomy and then switching to human anatomy. So my actual first teaching gig, I guess, was actually veterinary. So it's one of those things where you kind of go through a series of, wow, this keeps coming back in front of me. And whether you're God, Allah, universe, Muhammad, I mean, something is telling you that this is where you should be. And I remember teaching for the first time during my PhD, and it was an incredible experience to share knowledge with someone else. And I really think because over the course of my years, I've learned that I'm a connector. I'm on this earth to connect, and it's not because I need to be at the epicenter with all of my vectors going out and grabbing others, but my job is to just sort of be quiet on the sideline and see two fabulous individuals with a commonality that maybe they don't know. And so here I come and say, oh, well, you know that if you study the whale, myoderms, and you study that, then you'd all be on the same page. And isn't that cool? And okay, I'm gonna
Mm.
need you guys to be awesome, because that's what connectors do. So teaching was really great. And as I progressed through my postdoc and did some more teaching, I really decided that a life of tracking down grants and money and doing hardcore biochemistry research was just not going to be for me, that I really wanted to focus on research that could bring students into it, that got students to think, I have a really interesting question, but I'm not quite sure how to wrap my head around it, if it's anatomy or if it's biochemistry or maybe it's public health or maybe it's art and anatomy. I mean, I was open to absolutely everything. So kind of just followed that for a while, and trained a lot in clinical anatomy. I mean, got my feet wet in medical. So 20 years out of my 23 years of being a faculty member was all medical. And I really got good at clinical anatomy, and I started shadowing docs and surgeons and cardiovascular so I could learn what I was getting the medical students into. Like, I know what you're going to
Yeah.
say, M3.
By the way, it's not how it was in school. Remember that
Right.
stuff
Nope,
we
not
had?
at all.
This is different. So, being a professor for so many years, right?
Yeah.
You've really seen, I think, an evolution of what's transpired over the last 20 years with technology and AI
Oh,
and
yeah.
plagiarism and all sorts of other
Hmm.
things that exist. What do you see maybe that's different in the past decade from when you really were first coming in and teaching over the last, I guess it's 2 decades of teaching. What's different now that maybe wasn't there when you first started?
Um, I would, whew, I would say two things. One, I have found that, when I was in school, when you were in school, we're all in school, it was the accumulation of factual knowledge. And if you had more stuff shoved in your head with more facts, you were considered smarter than your peers. I mean, I think you could probably even see that if in the United States, you are where I'm most familiar with the growth through public and private institutions pre-university, very much the same thing. If you could get through all your math tables, if you could do your multiplication, if you could spell, I mean, you were considered gifted or smart, or however we wanted to label it back then. And the whole introduction of social media and the internet and computers, and even if you want to go to right now, AI, facts and information don't mean jack anymore. I
Hmm.
can look up anything. I can tell you the Krebs cycle. I can tell you the amino acids and what they look like on my phone. I can probably jump in and tell you the 5 different ways to clear atherosclerotic plaque in the anterior interventricular, artery of the heart, because I got my phone on me, right?
Right.
What I'm going to see, or what I'm seeing now, is the people that can link and can critically take data or facts and actually make them usable and synthesize them. They're going to be the leaders. They're going to be leaders in the fascial scientific world. They're going to be leaders in the business world. They're going to be leaders in the consumer world, because what they do is they don't just take accumulation of information. They're actually doing and growing knowledge with it. And this is
Mm.
probably the most, or the biggest riff I see now than what I used to see. Is we used to use knowledge and information sort of, at least I, interchangeably, like, oh, let's learn these learning objectives. Now it's information and data, and it's knowledge and wisdom. And there is a huge canyon between the two of them. There are students
Wow.
that just think facts are all I need, and you get them in a tight situation to think on their feet, and they cannot do it. It is
Wow.
absolutely mind blowing.
Yeah, I mean, that seems it's like in a world where I always thought that when I was younger, technology would bring us closer together. It actually really makes the glaring divide more aware, right? You really see it more and more. Yeah.
Yes. So
Yeah.
that has become very much so. Or even, in school, they showed the bell graph and like, oh, everybody's kind of in the middle and you have some students fringing, on either ends. It's bimodal. It truly is the haves and have nots. Either you can assimilate and get that information into a critical thinking pattern that looks at yeah, expenditures and money in and a business type style. I mean, that's still critical thinking, or you're looking at a patient that's coming in with multiple system failures and you're going to need to take all that in. Yeah, it's that's probably the biggest difference. And the one I really miss is the fact that I have, as a connector, a real desire to know my students and to see, like, what's going on. I noticed that you were a little distant today, or
Mm.
if you want to talk something out, you know where to find me. I just want to let you know that if the mind and spirit are not jamming, then it's going to be really tough for you to get through, the anterior forearm muscles today in lab. So being aware of that, and it's really hard to bridge that type of desire to the students without them thinking that I have singled them out, that I'm making them feel uncomfortable, that I am bringing unnecessary attention to their woes. And and it hurts because my heart is big to help others. And I get told, to stay in your lane, don't,
Right.
you
Well,
know,
it's yeah,
me.
it's yeah, but that's it is I think, it's so impressive to even have a teacher that's noticing, that's aware and saying, I'm observing a behavior in you. I'm seeing this is really so not academic at all. That really is a human to human link. And that's probably why so many of your students actually go on to do great things and not just take tests and pass tests, which I
Right,
feel like
right.
I had said that yesterday to Yat Vanderwall. I took one of his courses
Oh,
and I said to him, yeah, like sometimes I felt like, he said, how, did you not take biology? I was like, oh yeah, no, I took biology. I mean, I enjoyed it to a certain extent, but like things like physics and chemistry, I kind of felt like I was just taking tests and I was studying to take a test. And it
yeah.
was, I never really had enough time in a semester because I'm not one of the super smart ones. I really had to work hard just to pass the test. And
Mhm.
then it was like years later, I could get the recall of what it was I learned. But I mean, I guess that's the problem with academia is there's never enough time and there's so much to learn and yeah, too little time and maybe a lack of care, but I totally get that. So I love that. So what about, because you sort of had mentioned it, the fascia in general, what was the initial spark for you that you looked at fascia and said, that's kind of interesting. I hadn't heard about that because that seems to, that's kind of the lead up to what's involved you with the Fascia Research Congress. But where was your introduction to it all?
Yeah, it's interesting. Again, it's called paying attention, and I think it's great for those that, can set the social media aside and just become immersed in something that they're passionate about. So like listening to this podcast and being like, yes, I am passionate about my patients, my clients, my research, what I want to do in the next 3 years, 5 years. And so when I was moving through my career and dabbling more in the clinical side and getting into medical instruction and teaching, I absolutely had the coolest shift to leave the allopathic world and enter into the osteopathic world. And my idea of human form changed over those 12 years. And I became a soldier for the mind, body, spirit. I mean, absolute soldier for it. I um, loved utilizing anatomy as sort of just the beginning of the discussion of how that person may have lived, how they may have dealt with some of the morphology that the students had a chance to discover while working on that donor body. Because ultimately, when you're in a lab and you're training medical students, you have the best teacher in the world lying there in the most amazing gift you could ever be given. And you're going to know by the end of 16 weeks more about this individual's components than anyone ever did. So then the opportunity says, how can you learn about the person. And yes, they had a name and they had a wonderful life, and that's not for us, to delve into. But I love talking to students about, you just struggled. And sorry, I don't want to get too graphic, but like say they were working in the abdomen and they may have struggled with a bit of connective tissue, a little bit of fascia adhesion from a previous surgery. And let's take that a step farther and think about, that any pain, because we know that there's somatic body, and that somatic body is actual perceived pain, not visceral pain. That's kind of the nebulous pain in our body. So let's think about what that might have been. I wonder if that hindered them playing the piano, running after their grandchildren, getting into the car. Let's think about how that body manifested as the whole and not just the pieces that we're looking at. And in the osteopathic world, and maybe this is the pre-COVID world, or just the fact that I had great faculty next to me that were always encouraging that sort of out of your lane thinking, that sort of paradigm shift thinking. I really loved it, and I carried that with me, and I have learned that the more you go against the grain, and the grain, I will say, is the teach the forearms, flexors of the forearms, the extensors of the forearms. Don't think about whether they were left or right-handed, or maybe that they loved tennis, and maybe we can look at, this type of entrapment or this nerve pain or blah, blah, blah. They don't like paradigm shifts. They don't like fringe thinkers. So I get shoved to the side quite a bit now, especially post COVID, when they just feel, I guess, the desire to go after only the anatomy. So what do you
Mm,
do when you're already on the fringe? You push it more, right? That's what that's
yeah.
what I do. And so it was, hi, why are we not studying all of this really cool stuff that we keep putting in a bag that's gonna, be incinerated? Because I'm fairly certain that the heart sitting in a really amazing fibroelastic case called the pericardium probably has something to do with the actual function of this amazing pump we see. And so I started studying, cardiac tamponade and looking at, how the great vessels were formed embryologically. And I'm like, dang, if we didn't have a pericardium, this this fabulous little pump that we're looking at would not be doing what it does right now. And so
Mm.
it was just sort of this, wow, I need to get my head wrapped around this stuff, pun intended. So I started reading into that. I started literally like just emailing people after I'd read their papers and being that annoying graduate student again that's like, I just read your paper and I think it's really cool. And can we be friends and talk about it,
That's
please?
kind of what I did. I would read somebody's paper and then I would look at their bibliography and I go to those people and learn from them and start emailing
Oh
people
my
and
goodness.
calling people in other countries and things like that. Yeah, exactly. That's how we learn, right?
Yep. And Sue, you were absolutely spot on. The best resource digging you can do is the citations.
That's it.
Absolutely. It's the place you go. It's the place to do your digging because that paper is grounded in the giants that they stood on. So, yeah.
I
Um,
love that. I love
Fascia
that.
was just like, okay, I'm gonna look at this. And no one else wanted to play Sue. All the other anatomists like backed away. So I became sort of this woman on her own fascial mission, to the point where I actually, was like removed from teaching anatomy because I just couldn't, I don't know if I was couldn't be contained. I was bringing up things that were not in the book. I was asking questions. The most fearful thing that you can ask post COVID is why. Why are we doing it this way? Um, so yeah, so
Question. I have a question. Yes, I get that. Yeah. Yeah, totally. Totally.
it's scary on the outside, but there are amazing people. And so yes, I can talk to Carla and Robert Schleip and Antonio and Neil and so many of the people that we know and Yop and John Sharkey and just say, how do you do it? Because we're obviously not all what I would consider mainstream right now. I mean, we have our mainstream folks, but in my academic world of concrete buildings and what I thought was free thought, it's often met with some decent pushback.
Oh
You
yeah, I'd shared with Rebecca before we went on that when I presented at Penn State University, and this was back in 2009, 9 or 10, something like that. And I was trying to explain fascia, and the anatomy professor shot my shit down. I mean, he was like, everything she's talking about is a fallacy. There is no evidence of this. And I was like, no, no, no. I just presented like research papers to you. Like I pointed out people are doing research, and, and he balked on it. And I essentially said, you just sound like a lazy professor who's not going to change your curriculum. And the entire student faculty went bananas over that. Like they were like, oh, I can't believe you said that to him. But in the end,
Oh,
I said Tom Myers, when I told him what happened as I was crying, he
we've
said,
been there.
the collegiate world proceeds one funeral at a time. And so I think it takes the people out on the fringes to move things ahead. And that's where I think Tom Findlay was so iconic. When I met him back in the early 2000s, when I was questioning everything that I had learned, and had questions, he would just send research papers. He would never answer anything, but he would
Right.
challenge you to read the papers. And then in 2004, when he said we need to establish a fascia congress, we have to have a society that is focused on fascia, and we need to bring researchers together to share their research. And once again, I think it was Tom Myers on the phone who kind of half burst out laughing, saying, I just want to make sure I heard you, that you wanted researchers to share their work. Are you, is that what you just said out loud? Because I'm pretty sure that is like not academic. Okay.
Oh,
And Tom said, this is the paradigm shift. We need to all come together. And then
mhm.
2007, we had our very first Fascia
We
Research
did.
Congress, 150 researchers come together. And what I found fascinating at that first Congress was, while everybody's, their research was different. They all had, different exclusions, different parameters, different hypothesis, a different abstract. The conclusions were so similar in what they were trying to explain, that it was at that moment where really I think there was a turning point. And now we're in the 12th Fascia Research Congress. We've got the 12th one, and you have become now the president of the Fascia Research Congress. And taking on this job, it just sounds daunting to me. So tell me, how do you not lose your mind being the president of a Congress that is also uncertain of how to build a conference, how to bring information out to the world? I see we've been slow in marketing. We're slow in using AI tools. We're slow in building a community. And in Montreal, when I think that was where we met, in Montreal,
Sure
at
did.
the Congress there, that it was smaller than it was. And of course, COVID, okay, there's a lot of that going on. But I'm hoping that with everything that I've seen you and this Congress do, the people that are working in the body of the conference are really bringing back, I think, Tom Findley's primary goal, which was to bring clinicians and researchers together. So tell me a little bit about what your hopes are of the
Mhm.
Fascia Congress as the president. What are your main goals, and what are the initiatives for the organization?
Yeah, so I mean, I am just so grateful that Tom brought me in like 20, oh gosh, that was pretty early, like 2018, and said we need anatomists in here too. I mean, why are we not getting more buy-in from them? And again, I giggled just like you did, where you sort of sit back and you're like, okay, yeah, I want to just think about the 60 friends of mine, the colleagues that teach all around the world, teach gross anatomy to medical school, whether it's in Europe or in the US. And I'm just going to think, I wonder how many of them actually know how to spell fascia. I'm just going to think, I mean, that's kind of where I was like, holy crap, this is
Yeah,
not,
they have to change curriculum. That's like
oh,
changing a book in college.
God,
That's
you
not going to
imagine.
happen. How are they going to change their mindset?
Yeah. But, and so here's what I see. Yes, there's a perceived, and I would agree with you, Sue, of not slowing down, but of a reassessment of fascia, and from the robust group that grew in Berlin, and when we were in what I think weren't we in British
I can't remember where that for I
Powerful.
didn't go to that
Well,
one.
it was very robust, and I think you saw people really excited to air what they had been sitting on in their little nest egg and were proud to share. And I think that the sharing piece has grown with social media, with open access article reading, and people getting out information, but it's not as organized as I would have loved to see it. And at the same time, where there's sort of some disorganization or someone who is sitting on that really cool egg of knowledge has already shared it in some open access journal article, but it hasn't really been shared with all the rest of us people that are already, loving fascia, definitely know how to spell it, and, are following our research and our business goals with it. And I don't know, or what I dream is that the Fascia Research Society begins to cast this fishing net back out to all these little eggs that have been dropped everywhere and begins to fish them back into a group of very strong individuals who are also pushing a paradigm shift, right? I mean, if you look at Western medicine, whether you're in Europe or whether you're in the United States or in South America, Western medicine has a decent hold on how we look at health. So cracking that code becomes very challenging. And a slight deviation, to sort of collecting all this information, we need to do that because in order to sell it back to Western medicine, we need to sell it with the science that developed Western medicine.
That's
And
right.
it's tough to do because, as we know, the science that sold Western medicine is the reductionist science, is the hierarchy science, is the antiquated, sorry, Galileo, sorry, Galen, and sorry, Vesalius. I'm going to call you out because 803 years ago, yeah, that was super cool that a bunch of you white dead guys, got all together and put this out. But we need a change. Health is not working the way you deciphered it and the way Western medicine married it and took it forward. The only two major systems that we know very little about are the lymphatic system and the fascial system. And if you
Yeah.
don't think those two are the key to overall health, well, then I I'll take my soapbox elsewhere because it's certainly not the systems that we've been reducing down to the cellular level and playing with genetic codes and inserting all these things. No, it's the
Well
fact that you
done.
never stepped back and looked at the two largest systems that can't be reduced, that don't have a hierarchy, and science hates the F out of that.
Yes, yes, that's it.
Hates it.
Yes, they do. And I think because fascia is kind of ubiquitous, it's sort of this global matrix, and we really have not spent enough time researching it. And I even feel like we're really just at the beginning of utilizing technology in a way to look at the cellular components. And there's that fine line between what we perceive. And I recall way back in the early 2000s when some of Schleip's papers came out about discovering active contractile cells in fascia. And
Mhm.
that turned into the fitness industry and going, oh, that's what makes you feel stiff and the this and the that. And I'm like, wait a minute. You're
Oh, yeah.
taking
Yeah.
cell biology and you've turned it macro a little too fast. Let's all come back and slow down a little bit. We got to
Right.
talk about cells a little. We got to know what we're talking about. You can't just talk about muscle without talking about cells. Okay. So it was like this big paradigm shift where,
Mhm.
it was like somebody just put all of these ideas in a car and it just went racing down the road. And I know Tom was like, somebody make sure they run out of gas at some point. Like it went a little too fast too soon. And I agree with you, like a big problem of the healthcare industry. I always say, like, I'd like to say that the healthcare industry is horribly broken, but I don't ever think it worked in the first place. So you can't break something that's completely messed up and broken from the get-go. And I think that I think you're right. The nervous system, super complicated. Lymphatic system, more complicated. And when you're talking about waste, you're talking about transportation, you're talking about communication
Oh, yeah.
and health. Well, there's a bridge between the lymphatic system and the nervous system, and all systems is fascia. So there are people who do not want to talk about fascia that are like, it's totally irrelevant. And I think
Or
how
it's too complex
it's
and it
too
makes them
exactly.
scared, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's the most abundant material in the body. We should be looking at it, and not just it as an autonomous system, but how the interstitial fluids are also being driven toward the lymphatic system and how they work together to maintain health. I think there's a huge conversation in this.
Oh,
And
yeah. I can
so,
talk fluid with you because I think that's fascinating. And I think that's where I want to see the Congress. So whether it ebbs and flows with how many people are in the society and are active, I think it relies on all of us. And we have something we all need to shoulder is that we need to start bringing the the cool knowledge that has been placed out there and bringing it back to the nest. Get all the eggs back to the nest because we are only strong together. If we
yes,
start to stay and say, well, I'm going to follow my sports medicine world, or I'm going to follow my cellular world, or I'm going to follow, we stay partitioned and Western medicine doesn't listen. But I am guessing that there is a lot of science already out there that has been published and, what people are doing in the clinic and the case studies that are coming out with pelvic health for, women. All of that
yeah,
is out there, but we're not packaging it in a way that Western medicine wants to eat or wants to read or wants to grab. It still
that's
gives it
it.
stupid word that I
Yeah.
hate is alternative. Oh no. Oh no, it's not alternative medicine. I'm sorry. No.
I would call it complementary. I think that they
Yeah.
work together, but you're touching on a lot of things here. I mean, there's some, first of all, okay, so fascia's role, there's fascia, I think it has evolved over the years, but
Mhm.
what would you say are some of the most significant discoveries in the field today?
And again, I think that it because it's so ubiquitous and you're spot on, Sue, because it is such a large system, because it's pervasive, because it's, if you will use the word promiscuous, it touches all these other systems, that the big bold statements that are coming out in science about, Neil thesis paper in 2018 with the fascial interstitium and recognizing that everything that I actually learned as a student being called artifact actually
Uh-huh.
was moving fluid around these, bundles of collagen within the dermis of my integument, and that opening the eye to the a lot of the ligand and kinase activity, which are fancy words for how cells chit chat with each other within the fluid. So if I want to say hi to my neighboring cells down the road, I spit out some proteins, the fluid moves them, my neighbors down the epithelial border get that information, pull it in, attach it to their little kinase in their cell membrane. It turns on a whole cool phosphorylation, signal, and I get to do something fun as a cell that another cell influenced. When we started thinking about the fact that communication is really a part of fluid movement, and the communication is actually happening within the fascia, the biochemistry world started doing tons of stuff. And, even the review paper that I wrote on hyaluronic acid was mind blowing and mind numbing to write. I will never do that to myself again. Oh my God, I cannot get those, I cannot get those
True.
hours
Well,
back.
and also rating papers is so time consuming, and doing research. I mean, I did when we did the very when I had asked Tom Findlay for about 8 years to help me to create a research paper, because when I worked with Melt, we got all these changes on people, and I'm like, well, my whole idea is like fascia, the fluids in fascia stop moving. They don't permeate properly, and then when that
Yep.
happens, now tissue breaks down, and so communication of cells breaks down, the nervous system breaks down. So I have this idea, and he's like, well, keep coming back, and when you actually have a good abstract, we'll see what we can do to help. Okay, 8 years go by, and now I get to do to propose to the board a research study. And I remember them saying to me, well, what if the research proves you wrong? And I said, fair enough. It just makes you want to go back to the
You
drawing
go.
board. But that's the whole point, is like to actually do measurement to figure out the what you're doing is important. So then what you learn is that, okay, you have exclusions. So We couldn't have people who were overweight, had back surgeries, have had any types of injections, herniated discs, anything that was diagnosed. You had to exclude all the important people from your study. So out of the 200 people who then apply, there's only 40 or 50 that will actually do the study. Okay, and then you are now spending money because you're doing this with a school. It was with the New Jersey Institute of Technology. Now you're paying to have these an ultrasound and to do all of
Oh
the
yeah.
work. You're paying so $30,000 later, and then you have to, after 30 days or 60 days, get these people to come back who are in your research study, and so many of them feel good, then they don't want to come back, and now you're paying people to come back just to do the measurement. Okay. So it costs a lot of money, it takes a lot of time, and it's exhausting. So I think there's got to be some way, and what I hope with the Fascia Research Congress is that and this year we have clinicians doing pre-cons and also in the body of the conference. It's not just science this year, hallelujah. But I hope that what it does is it piques the interest of the science community to do research on well-known techniques and ways of self-care, ways of hands-on therapy to figure out ways to measure. And I think that that's the sticking spot with academia, is getting the academic community to work with clinicians to actually do valid research. So how do we bridge that gap? Where's the, like, what's the missing sauce that
Yeah.
Rebecca thinks might change things?
Yeah. So, when you talked about, if you talk to a cardiologist, they're all going to publish in this one journal and it's all going to be on cardiology and we're all just going to keep talking about heart. And you can put in everything from the pericardium all the way down to a contractive myocyte, and it all goes in that one journal. Whereas, a hyaluronic paper goes off into some biochem journal. The tests of whether or not this particular fascial intervention allows people to touch their toes better goes into a different journal. It's like, no, we need everything together. So that's what I'm hoping, is that the Congress, especially this year, is that seed, and that the journal that we actually have as our home, the Journal of Bodywork and Movement Therapy, becomes the same place that you talk about fasciocytes and cellular and fluid movement. At the same time, we look at helping people recover from stroke and why this is a whole body, approach with physiotherapy and not just a rehabilitation of the shoulder and then you send them to somebody else for the hip. So we need to bring that together. And so the Congress's main goal is, and the newest thing we can think of is, number one, bringing the hard science, but keeping it there as the center and bringing clinicians around it. And basically saying, yes, I understand, but I'm seeing it this way. How, like I said, how do I track that? How do I
Measure.
capture that? And
Yeah.
then we're going to have a panel every single afternoon where everybody, all clinicians, researchers, people of interest are all on this panel. And we thought, you know what, instead of doing Q&A after everybody does a little talk, let's just do a full-blown discussion. Where do we go from here? So people can talk to, Tom Myers is going to be sitting there right next to Neil Thies, who's going to be sitting next to someone that just did an amazing dance display and talked about how to move fascia the way they feel it and the way their clients feel it. And I want everyone, because they're all brilliant in what they bring to the table, oh yeah, to be at the table. I'm so tired of tables having little, markers that say research only, or, practitioners only, or physiotherapists,
Yeah, it
or
does no
yoga.
good. Yeah, we got to
I
come
want them all at
together.
the
We
same
all
table,
have to play in the sandbox.
because if you are the smartest person in the room, you are in the wrong room. And we
Well said.
have to just get our heads around that.
Yeah, no,
You're
I
in the
feel
wrong
it.
room if you're the smart one. So
I
let's get
feel
us
it.
all together. And so I'm super excited for Congress. I think this is going to be a Congress where people feel seen. I think this is a Congress that allows movement in the morning, which we all love to do, and just sort of feel awake. And then that same energy is carried into our keynotes. And then we have, education platform sessions, we have movement sessions. I mean, when were we at a Congress where there were massage tables out for people to show each other what they're talking about? Like, oh, I heard you when you mentioned that in your oral presentation. Can you do it on me so I can feel what you're actually doing so we can continue this on? And I think, my global push is collaboration. Just get the emails and the phone numbers and the LinkedIn's or whatever we all use. I don't know. I still have a paper business card, so clearly I have placed myself strongly in the Gen X
Rebecca, now we could
category.
just put our iPhones together and connect. That's how we can do it.
Well,
But I also think, like,
yeah,
isn't there an app that we're also using to communicate with people at the Congress? Isn't this
yeah.
something?
And I
Yeah.
don't ask me, I'm only the president.
I'm pretty sure. Well, but I mean, to be a president of the
Yeah.
whole organization is really, there's only so much you can have a touch point to. And I think that there's just, I really have to commend the whole collective. And I see a
Oh
lot,
my
a
goodness.
lot of women who are now organizing the Congress. And I feel like, not
Yep.
to say that women are better organizers, but they might be. So I am kind of excited that we're gonna have a lot of great speakers. So speaking on speakers, I mean, I'm sure that you've just kind of shared what the attendees can expect from this upcoming Fascia Research Congress, which is very different than the last few that we've had. But are there any particular sessions or speakers that you're super excited about that you're thinking, I think this is going to be a great one?
Well, there's just two things to highlight that I'm very excited about is that we are doing an evening of grace and praise forward, I guess, for the Ida Rolf Foundation, which is really where we came from. I mean, we've been a part of their society for years, and we're given blessings and love to go out and sort of be our own society. So we're going to spend an evening watching an amazing documentary on Ida Rolf, and there's, bar open and round tables for discussion and just an opportunity again to bring like-minded people to provide a thank you and a gathering space for all of us that were touched by not only the society but just the introduction of the fact that human touch has a place in healthcare, and
Yeah.
we're going to do that. There's also going to be the second piece of the documentary of Fascia in Action that was first shown in Berlin, and they have now completed part two. So that'll start us out one morning during coffee and being able to watch that documentary. And I think it's inspiring. It's like, it's watching a show maybe about your favorite sports individual or watching your favorite, musician. I mean, this is a chance to feel inspired, to think creatively. I almost want everybody to have like a whiteboard around their neck. So when they've got a really great idea, like just write it on your board and then just walk around and then like someone will be like, wait a minute, I thought about that same thing with radiology and the ultrasound, and maybe and so then
Hmm.
you just show your boards out. Next thing you know, you've got a collaborative world. But, it's gonna be hard. It's not easy to do when you're bringing in two worlds that literally do not want to talk to each other.
Well, I
You
don't know if they
not
don't want to, or it's just that they
don't
don't
know
know
how
how
or
to. Yeah, how
um,
do we talk to one another? And what I also love is they're doing some pre-cons. I know Jill Miller is going to be there
yeah.
doing a pre-con. Diva will be there. I know David Lazondak,
Oh
Eric
yeah,
Franklin. I'm
absolutely. They're
doing
gonna have
one.
roundtables for
Yeah,
discussion.
so these are 3 hour pre-cons the day before the Congress starts. So for those of you guys who are listening, you might even just, if you're not like super into the whole fascial community, but you want to experience some piece of it, these are also, there's a day before where there are a multiple amount of 3 hour events that are happening in the morning and afternoon that will give, and what I'm hoping is that some of the researchers will actually come and experience some of those sessions. I think that this
Um,
then kind of parlays into all of the long sitting that we do, just wrecking our fascia, by the way.
Well, guess
Uh,
what? We have movement now placed in between every single keynote because I'm not going to sit through more keynotes.
I'm
And
so grateful
I
for
mean,
that.
we're going to get up, we're going to stretch, we're going to actually engage what we're learning about. So I'm super
Love.
excited for that. And Sue, you just is a thing that I needed to share. Meeting you in 2022 was very intimidating. I'm an academic. What do I know about treating anyone? And I just want to say that I'm hoping that more people will be inspired, whether it's because of my insane, ridiculous amount of energy that I bring to just about everything, but to step in and talk to the people that are really cool, that are the big names. I mean, I want people to say, "Hi, I own this physiotherapy, clinic, and I have 14 people," and there's Sue right there. Like, that's what I was. I was like, "Oh my God, is that Sue? It's been
That's
Sam."
really weird. I mean, I hear people say that, and I'm like, I'm really not
Because,
know that
I
anybody.
want people to talk to Carla. I want people who might be nervous to
Yeah,
talk to Jill or David. Just go up and say, "Hi, I'm Rebecca. And I don't know a whole lot of what you do because I live over in this corner of the world, but
yeah. Well,
I
that's it. I
can I
think
talk to
our,
you?"
yeah, our community, I think, is very open. And I feel like we don't want to leave anybody behind. And I can honestly say that, I feel like I just know a small bit of information
Mhm.
well, right? But what I am is a consistent learner, and I'm always trying to figure out how to gain more information. I just told you I was just at Jaap van der Waal's 4-day course on the embryo, which is like taking an
That'd be
entire
fantastic.
semester of college in 4 days. So you
I
leave
wish I
there
could have
sort
listened.
of like exploding in your mind
Mhm.
over what you've learned and gone, God, I never knew that. But the way that he describes it, I was like, I think I might need to go back to school at some point. I don't know if I'll have time in my lifetime to do it, but I really want to. But
Well, you
anyway, I
inspired
digress.
this person who only works on the deceased. You inspired her in 2022 to actually go and enroll in Anne and Chris Frederick's stretch therapy out in Arizona and do the
Oh,
whole week. So guess who actually trained on a live person and is now a level 1 practitioner. So now I can start to be the what I want. I am a PhD clinician
I
now.
love that.
I'm
And
bringing
And
that
big shout
because I
out to
need
Chris and Ann
people.
Frederick also. Like
Oh, they're
the
fantastic.
both of them, like what they've done and their community and what they do to connect and learn and grow. I mean, like they're like so top notch.
So
I
it
love
was
the
a
two of
game
them so
changer.
much.
It was a game changer for me
Yeah.
just to feel the tissue that I work on, to feel the dynamics behind it, the difference it can make. And I was very
Yeah.
appreciative of that. So again, the constant learning, and that's really what the Congress is. The Congress is, yes, it's the hugs and the handshakes and the excitement, which I obviously, so you cannot put a price on how exciting it is to be in person and just feel all of that. But the constant learning, I just thank you for that. And I hope somebody
Of
finds
course.
that next person that inspires them, whether it's
Yes.
how do I use ultrasound or how do I figure out this measurement? I want everyone to leave with the next little, exciting piece that they're going to build upon or that new connection.
Where do you, I'm curious, where do you see the field of fascial research heading in the next decade?
Well, I know what I can focus on, and that's just in my own realm, is that I am beating down the doors of the resources that the United States allopathic programs use to teach their medical students. And I am going to be annoying, is probably the best way I could say it, and to start to rewrite the textbooks and the resources and to give them an opportunity to say, no, you don't need to rewrite your course. You just need to weave this in. Or can't you see, do you want to be the last group standing or have Yale be the last medical school that hasn't bought into the fact that this is the system that needs to be your underlying foundation for all things going forward? It needs to happen from an educational standpoint. I want to reach out to the residence directors and I want to reach out to those that actually live within the fascial planes of the head and neck and say, what do you need us to do to get someone resident ready for plastics in face and neck? I
Mm,
mean,
yeah.
that type of the world I know. I want to start bridging the gap in the education. I want to start sharing people. There is a right way to bring fascia into the medical curriculum that has been so jettisoned for 800 years. So
Yeah. I mean, I think
where I
there's a
want to go.
yeah, there's a big opportunity, I think, in the collegiate world for PhDs when they're doing thesis projects to bring these kind of concepts into the collegiate world through thesis projects. That's even where we did the first research paper was through as a thesis project for students. I went in and I presented it to them and said, "Hey, this might be an idea for you."
Yeah.
So what about for, kind of advice for aspiring researchers? What advice would you give to young researchers or students interested in pursuing a career in anatomy or fascia or both? What would you? What's your advice on that?
And and I think this goes back to what we were talking about right in the beginning. So this is a great question, and I appreciate it, Sue. Is that, what interests you? What makes you stop on a feed in on your phone? What makes you stop on a show or flip through a magazine? I mean, a lot of us are starting to write for public reading. I mean, believe me, I don't need to convince another anatomist that I'm crazy and I like fascia. But, a paper that I or my publication that just came out in Vogue in November is like,
Saw it.
yeah.
So great.
So does it count towards me being a great academic and get me awards? No, because academia doesn't like that stuff. But what it does is it gets it out into mainstream. The
Yeah.
women's health magazines, the Nike magazines. Those are the things that I think are great. And if that attracts your eye, that's what you stop and you do that next dig. You go and read those citations. You go after, oh, who is this Robert Slight person? And you look them up on, PubMed.
Yeah.
That's where it starts. I really think because ultimately what grabbed your heartstring in the first place was that level of interest. And I think that's what got us all involved in this, right? Something is I'm passionate about, something that I want to help a client or I want to understand this better. And you do a deep dive. And ultimately, it's that connection that makes you continue to learn. If you weren't interested, believe me, there's a reason why I'm not a quantum physicist. Okay. Like
Right.
zero interest in quantum physics. But what I do have an interest in is, yeah, that mind, body, spirit, and really pushing the paradigm shift for medical education. That's my world. And I'm sure everyone here can sit here and write down on a paper or a post-it note or on their phone and say, I know why I entered this field, or I'm curious because my advisor is into fascia, or I'm curious because I talked to my anatomy professor and they mentioned fascia. What conundrum, what question, what thing keeps you up at night? And
Yeah.
to get back into just doing some deep dive in the literature. I mean,
Yeah.
literally, I sent an email to Carla Stecca, who didn't even know I existed,
Hmm.
and I read everything I could, and I said, I want to learn from you. And she
Yeah.
said, here's a spot, gather up your money and come out and pay. And it was the best thing I did. I paid for a course at, mid 40s to learn more. And it shook the shit out of me. And I am a
Yeah.
totally new person for it. Just like
Yeah.
you're talking, you went to Yop's class. Absolutely. Go talk to John Sharkey. Go talk to these people
Yeah.
and dig. Just dig. I get so excited.
No,
Like,
I mean, I the same way. When I had pain, and all of a sudden I was like, "What? Like inflamed fascia, plantar fasciitis? What the hell is inflamed fascia? Like, there's no exercise for that. What the hell is it,
yeah.
right?" But it sent me down a road where it is my pain was what kind of got me here. So I agree with you on that one. Okay, so last question.
Oh boy.
I ask everybody who comes on Anatomical Gangster the same thing. So the question is, if you could tell somebody something that you've learned in your lifetime that changed the way you see life itself, and it might very well change the course of their life, what would it be? What's something you've learned?
Um, and I guess this probably sums up my trajectory of my career, how I found myself as president of an international society, how I get through the day-to-day conundrums. You know, we as a society, a royal we, I use this very general we, have it in our heads somehow that being human is supposed to be easy. Like everybody who asks you those questions on the street, how's it going? And if you say, it's down in the dumps or whatever, they look at you like, oh, well, seriously, figure it out, and they look at you weird and they walk away. But we as a society think that being human is easy, and we need to set that aside and honestly embrace the fact that being human is hard and it is never supposed to be easy. So what we need to do is figure out how we're going to handle it being hard. And if we could just get over the fact that We're not meant to be perfect and we're not meant to have all the answers, that we could just give ourselves the grace to know being human is challenging. And when someone asks me, well, why are you always so emotional? Why do you get emotional when you say that, Rebecca? And I said, because it's a very messy world out there right now. And I shared this quote or this thought with Sue earlier. I just said, and the reason why I get frustrated, or the reason why I need to constantly tell myself that being human is hard and it's okay. It's okay. It's supposed to be hard. You're supposed to feel this way, is because when you actually start paying attention to the fact that it's supposed to be hard and it's a bit messy out there, you're going to find that you have these emotional mood swings, and that's okay because you're paying attention. If
Mhm.
you don't have those emotional mood swings, if you don't get pumped up or excited or frustrated because something doesn't work, or you can't figure out what's going on with your client and their pain regulation, or you can't figure out why your career just totally dumped on you and you're left with nothing, it's hard. But there's not one of us out there that do these things because we think it's going to be easy, or if we think it's, being human is easy. It's hard, and that's what drives you. And if someone would have told me earlier, Rebecca, we're doing this because it's hard, we're not doing this because it's easy, I
Yeah.
would have I would have appreciated it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, well said. Well, and I think that's beautiful advice because, if life were supposed to be easy, we would never be challenged. And if you're not challenged, you never grow. And growth is, when you think about it, right? We all went through that growth spurt where our bodies kind of hurt while we were doing it. And that's kind of the life experience, right? We've got to
Yeah.
grow and learn and challenge, and yeah, shit's going to come your way, and it's just how you react to it. That's kind of the peaceful part of it, is to not let it slow you down, but let it challenge you to be the best version of yourself that you can. I think that's great advice. I
Oh,
love that.
well summarized, Sue. Thank you.
Well, Rebecca, I am super excited to see you in August. For everybody listening, the Fascia Congress is August the 10th to wait a minute, it's the 10th to the 14th. It is in New Orleans. And Rebecca, if they want to register, where do they go?
Yep, we have the frscongress.org website, and they will be able to find that
I
on
love
our
that.
yeah.
I love that. Well, I'm going to make sure to put this into the show notes. I hope to see a lot of you guys at the Fascia Congress. And again, Rebecca, thank you so much for being on Anatomical Gangster. For those of you guys listening, please share this with people in your community. Make sure that you subscribe to the channel below. And until we see you on the next Anatomical Gangster, you be mindful, you be excited, and go out there and do great things. We'll see you all soon. Hey, I hope that you enjoyed that conversation with the amazing Rebecca Pratt. I hope that you stay curious and find out more about the Fascia Research Congress. Remember, it's August 10th to the 14th in New Orleans. So make sure that you click on that link below and join us at the Congress, and share this one with your friends, anybody in the community. And as always, stay healthy, stay happy, and stay curious. We'll see you all soon.